While I was in the hospital, my in-laws left my 10-year-old daughter home alone. So I reported them and fought for her safety. "You won't leave her alone," I yelled into my phone, my voice cracking with panic, my heart racing so fast I could hardly breathe. Only moments before, the hospital room felt smaller, the walls closing in, and I heard my daughter Melody's terrified voice. "My name is Christina Harper Tina, and to everyone who knows me, I'm a 36-year-old widow doing my best to raise my 10-year-old daughter after losing my husband, Michael, to a car accident. Mommy, Grandma, and Grandpa just drove away, and I'm here, alone." She had sobbed over the phone, saying they were going to Uncle Peter's party, and that I'm old enough to stay alone. "I'm afraid, Tina, you're overreacting." My father-in-law, Gerald, snorted into the phone. "Melody has battled anxiety since her father's death. She has occasionally woken up with nightmares, fearing that something might happen to me as well. Now, my in-laws have validated her worst fears by leaving her when she needed protection. We'll return in a few hours." I almost yelled, "She's 10 years old. It's against the law to leave a child that age alone." My mother-in-law Barbara added, "We're already halfway to Peter's. It's his 60th birthday, and the whole family will be there." Melody was invited, but she declined. That's her decision. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had left my child, their only granddaughter, behind because a party was more important, and I was unable to leave the hospital after an emergency gallbladder surgery. "I'm calling my neighbor Janet right now to check on Melody," I said, my voice shaking with anger, "and when I get out of here tomorrow, you will never have unsupervised access to my daughter." Once again, Barbara said dismissively, "You're being dramatic as usual, Tina," and Michael would have understood. "You're the one who's making her soft by using my late husband against you." That was the last straw. "This conversation is over. Stay away from my house." I hung up and called Janet, who lived across the street, and thank God she answered right away. I vowed to go check on Melody right away as I hung up, shaking with fear and rage. I knew this was only the beginning, as something felt terrible in my chest, not from the surgery, but from this profound betrayal by those who were meant to help protect what was most important to me. Growing up, Michael's parents had always undermined my parenting, that this went too far. When I was 26, I had Melody, and we were happily building our lives together. But Barbara and Gerald never quite approved of me because they thought their son had married beneath him, and made subtle remarks. Without constant guidance, I promised. Over to Jenna. My hands were shaking. The venue was gorgeous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Ohio River and crystal chandeliers. Thrown himself into the sea. So why was he here? 5 years ago, at the age of 35, I was working as a nail technician with confidence. The evening was turned every family get-together into a minefield of passive-aggressive remarks and unsolicited advice. "She's too attached to you, Tina," Barbara would say as Melody clung to my leg. "And Michael was never like that with me. That's because we taught him independence early," Gerald would add, implying that I was weakening her. Despite these difficulties, I made an effort to keep a relationship going with them, and Melody, because they were her only link to her father. And I thought it was important for her to have grandparents in her life, so I swallowed my pride, nodded, in agreement with their criticisms, and kept for Melody's sake. 3 days ago, I woke up with terrible stomach pain. I hurried to the emergency room, where the doctors determined that I had a cystitis, and that my gallbladder needed to be removed right away. I was terrified about Melody and called everyone I knew, but my suddenly with a sove town, and Janet could only assist part-time because of her work schedule. As I went into surgery, feeling that Melody would be taken care of, I felt guilty for keeping them at a distance for years. "See, Tina, family is what matters in a crisis," Barbara had said as she packed an overnight bag for my hospital. David's tense jaw in the light of the Remember That project I've been working on for the past 3 years, the one I couldn't talk much about. The algorithm for predictive analysis and healthcare, the one that's coming along whenever you ask about it, he said, letting his shoulders relax. Convenience they could leave for a party. "We may have our disagreements, but we're here when it counts." I trusted them with the most important person in my life, and I believed her. Janet called me back 10 minutes later and said, "I'm with Melody now. She's upset but okay. I've brought her to my house, and she's having cookies with my son." I can keep her until you're discharged tomorrow. As I waited for Janet to call back, I realized that this wasn't just a one-time mistake in judgment. This was who they truly were, and I had been blind to the danger. Janet's voice hardened. You had emergency surgery, but what if there were complications? What if you couldn't come home tomorrow? She said firmly. What they did was child abandonment. Tina, you need to report this. I hesitated. Her grandparents, Michael's parents, left a 10-year-old child alone in a house for a party. That night, I made a difficult call to Child Protective Services from my hospital bed. The social worker's voice was kind but serious as she took down my statement, explaining that this wasn't just a family situation. The reality of what could have happened hit me like a physical blow. What if there had been a fire? What if Melody had been hurt? What if someone had broken in? Disagreement. It was a blatant case of child endangerment, and we'll need to look into and record this. She explained that, according to state law, leaving a child at that age is considered neglect. I hung up the phone, but it rang again right away, and it was Gerald. What the hell, Tina? We just received a call from a government agency stating that they need to interview us about Melody. What did you do? Tell them the truth, I said in a surprisingly composed voice. You left my daughter to attend a party while I was in the hospital. It was a family get-together, not a crazy party, and she was completely safe. He yelled. She was terrified, Gerald. She's been experiencing anxiety since her father's death, and you left her alone. This is absurd. Grandparents, you think that leaving a child alone grants you rights, but you also have responsibilities. Gerald, which you totally neglected, just as you abandoned Melody. Barbara's sobbing because of what you've done. He said this in an attempt to make me feel bad about everything we've done for you. But what have you done aside from criticizing? My voice was shaking now, but it was anger instead of fear. Tell Barbara, I'm sorry she's upset, but I'm more concerned about my traumatized daughter. I'll be home tomorrow, and I don't want either of you at my house. You can't keep us from seeing Melody, he thundered. Watch me. I replied and hung up. That night, my hospital room felt empty and cold. I wondered if I had overreacted as I stared at the ceiling. But every time I closed my eyes, I heard Melody's terrified voice. Mom, I'm here alone. No, I hadn't overreacted. If anything, I had been too tolerant for too long. The hospital released me, and the following morning, Janet picked me up and told me about Melody's night, in which she had a hard time falling asleep. She hesitated before saying that this wasn't the first time they had left her alone, and I almost choked. Apparently, they went grocery shopping yesterday and left her home for about an hour. She didn't call you because they told her not to bother you while you were away. I kept asking quietly if you were really coming home today, my heart aching. Did she say anything else about what happened? When we got to Janet's house, Melody jumped into my arms and clung to me like she used to after Michael died. Mommy, you're back, she sobbed into my shoulder. I'm here, sweetie, I whispered, struggling through the pain of my surgical incision to hold her close. Recovering, white-hot rage swept through me. They had abandoned her twice and tricked her into being silent about it. I really apologize for what transpired. Later that afternoon, after settling back into our home, I changed the codes on our electronic door locks. I was still moving slowly from surgery, but determination pushed me forward as I called a locksmith to change the physical locks as well. Melody watched me with wide eyes. Are Grandma and Grandpa coming back? I sat next to her on the couch and carefully considered what I would say. Not for a while, honey. What they did was wrong and dangerous. They said I was being a baby, Melody whispered. And Grandpa said that he wouldn't be proud of me because I was so terrified and angry. Using Michael against our daughter was unforgivable. Your daddy would be. I am so proud of you. I told you firmly that calling me when you felt unsafe was the right thing to do. By the evening, my phone was ringing non-stop with calls and texts. From Gerald, Barbara, and even Michael's brother Peter. I finally answered Peter's call, saying, Tina, you need to calm down. My parents are furious, saying that you complained. They sent them to child services, changed the locks, and failed to pick up my daughter Peter twice. My voice was icy, and they left a 10-year-old alone to attend your birthday party. Look, they made a mistake by forgetting to pick someone up from soccer practice. It's a decision made by family members, Tina, I said, Will you leave your kids alone at that age? His silence told me that, so I went on. I filed a formal report. And yes, I've changed the locks. They're not welcome in my home until they acknowledge what they did and take steps to earn back my trust. Melody's grandparents' family status doesn't give them the right to put my child in danger. Discovered 3 voicemails from Barbara, all of which were increasingly hostile. This is ridiculous. Gerald and I have only ever loved Melody. The first one started, and the second I said something similar to her gentle tone, but I added steel to my voice, so it was obvious would be appalled by your actions. And the third one left just minutes ago. We're seeking legal advice regarding grandparents' rights. So you can't keep us. I deleted them all with trembling hands because I knew that the grandparents' rights might be threatened and that they had the means to take legal action. But I also knew that I had proof of their neglect and that protecting Melody was worth the fight. As I put Melody to bed that night, she looked up at me with teary eyes and asked, "Am I having issues with your grandparents?" As I kissed her goodnight, I wondered if any of us were really safe from what was about to happen. The following morning, I received an email from CPS confirming that they had opened an investigation into the social worker, Miss. "No, sweetheart," I reassured her. "They're the ones who made a bad choice, not you." Patterson would be interviewing everyone involved, beginning with a home visit that afternoon. The email also contained resources regarding family counseling and child safety. I was walking Melody to the bus stop when my phone rang again, and I turned it down, but a text message that said, "We're coming over at noon to talk," followed right away. This had gotten so bad that my hands were shaking. After seeing Melody, I could see that something had changed. "Are you going to tell me what that was about?" As we drove home, I inquired, observing as a normal startup and respected his privacy over his business. Confidentiality. David looked at me with a roguish smile as he said to me, "I called the non-emergency police line to report potential unwanted visitors, and the officer was understanding, especially when I told them about the CPS investigation and said they would have a patrol car drive by about noon at 11:55, as promised." Gerald's SUV pulled into my driveway, and I watched through the front window as they marched up to my door. Barbara's face was set in determination, and Gerald was furious when they discovered their key wouldn't work in the new lock. Barbara kept ringing the doorbell while Gerald hammered on the door. Gerald yelled at the camera, "We have a right to see our granddaughter. Your granddaughter is at school, and you have no right to be on my property after I've asked you to leave." The police were alerted, and as if on cue, a patrol car pulled up to the officer. I didn't open the door. Instead, I spoke through the video doorbell, telling you to leave. Gently knocked on my door saying, "Miss Harper, they're gone. Would you like to make a formal statement about the situation?" As I watched through the window, Gerald's face reddened, and he made wildly erratic gestures toward my house. Eventually, they got back in their SUV and left with one last glare toward my door. He took notes and assured me they wouldn't be returning today, but he also suggested I might want to consider a temporary restraining order if the harassment persisted. After he left, I sat on my couch, exhausted both physically and emotionally. I invited him in and explained everything, including the abandonment, the CPS report, and their appearance despite my explicit request not to come. My phone rang again, in the middle of the chaos, and this time it was Peter's wife, Jessica. "Tina, what's going on?" "Mum and Dad just called Peter in tears, saying the police escorted them away from your house." I sighed because they showed up without invitation after. I specifically told them not to come. The sight of my surgery throbbed, and I realized I hadn't taken my pain medication that morning. Jessica hesitated. "No, but then please don't ask me to accept what you wouldn't tolerate for your own children. Don't you think you're taking this too far?" she asked. "They made a mistake, but a mistake that endangered my child." I interrupted. "Would you have left your sons alone at 10 years old?" she asked. After hanging up, I checked Facebook to see my notifications. I felt physically sick after reading Barbara's public distortion of events. She had posted a lengthy, self-pitying message about being kept away from our precious granddaughter and being falsely accused of neglect. Were several challenging answers, but The truth was beginning to come to light despite their efforts to control the story. And a significant plot twist that I hadn't expected was developing, and the family was starting to doubt their version of events. Based on our investigation so far, including our conversations with your in-laws, there's sufficient evidence to support your claim of child neglect, said Miss Patterson from CPS, who was sitting in my living room 3 days later, as she concluded her interview with me while Melody was at school. She reviewed her notes and stated that your daughter had confirmed being left alone twice, and that your in-laws had. What happens now? I asked, feeling both relief and anxiety. We'll finish our report next week. While this doesn't rise to the level of criminal charges, it will be on record should any future incidents occur. She acknowledged leaving her, but they insisted it wasn't for long, and that she was completely safe. I'm not sure if I do, or at least not in the same way, after she left. I checked my email and saw a message from a lawyer I didn't recognize, and the subject line made my blood run cold. Have you considered family counseling? It might help establish boundaries if you plan to allow them back into your lives eventually. When I opened the formal letter about grandparent visitation rights with Melody, my hands trembled. It stated that Gerald and Barbara had hired legal counsel to seek visitation rights with Melody, citing their deep and meaningful relationship with their granddaughter, and alleging that I-37 was alienating them without cause. My surgical wounds were still hurting. My friend Elaine, an attorney, called me within minutes after I moved too quickly, reminding me that my in-laws had chosen a party over my daughter's safety. First, don't panic, she said. Second, they're overplaying their hand. Grandparents' rights cases are notoriously difficult to win. Especially, I would be pleased to represent you in the event that there is an active CPS finding of neglect. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. I just don't understand how they've twisted this around so completely. People who can't accept responsibility frequently fit the narrative, as Elaine explained. But the facts are on your side, Tina. That evening as Melody, when the doorbell rang while I was eating supper, I looked at the camera stream and saw Peter, standing by himself, looking uneasy. I hesitated, then answered the door and asked, "Can we talk?" I allowed him to keep Melody in sight in the dining room while he questioned softly. "I spoke with Jessica's sister," he said, sitting rigidly on the edge of my couch. "She's a child psychologist." He ran a hand through his hair and added, "I didn't want to believe they would do something so irresponsible. She remarked that what Melody's parents did was completely wrong and could have caused him stress." Peter appeared sincere when he answered, "I didn't either. That's why I trusted them with her care." He turned to face Melody, who was cautiously observing us from the dining room. "I would like to apologize for not checking on her myself," and I nodded. I was troubled because I didn't know Melody was alone when they came to my party. They told everyone that you had arranged alternative care, which is why she wasn't with them. This new revelation shocked me. He turned to me once more and said, "I've told Mom and Dad to drop the legal threats Jessica linked, and I won't." Conflict was about to start, but a week later, I sat in my living room across from Gerald and Barbara and felt for the first time that I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Between us on the coffee table was a formal agreement that had taken days to negotiate. Barbara hadn't spoken to me directly since coming into my house, and her eyes were red-rimmed but defiant. Gerald appeared aged in some way, but he still had the confidence that had always distinguished him. Elaine, my lawyer friend, sat next to me, and their lawyer, a stern-looking man named Mr. Bradshaw, flanked them. The Millers admit their mistakes in judgment by leaving Melody unattended, and they agree to finish 3 family therapy sessions and 6 sessions of a grandparenting education program before they can resume unsupervised visits with Melody. Diminished. "Let's review the terms one final time," Elaine stated professionally. Mr. Bradshaw gave a rigid nod, looking directly at my in-laws. "I confirmed that Miss Harper has agreed to dismiss the CPS complaint and allow supervised visitation. In the interim, beginning with 2 hours twice monthly at neutral locations. This isn't about punishment. Rather, it's about Melody's safety." I believe that this has been exaggerated, but will sign. As they scrawled their signatures on the document, I didn't feel satisfied or triumphant. Instead, I was relieved that the fight was over and hopeful that healing could start. After they left, I discovered Melody sitting on her bed, holding Mia. Picture of Michael she had on her bedside table. Are Grandma and Grandpa upset with me? They were never really mad at you, sweetheart. They're sad about the situation, but we're all going to work together to make things better. Will I see them again? She asked in a quiet voice as I sat next to her and put an arm around her shoulders. Yes, I told her, but for a while. Things will be a little different as we establish some new guidelines to 3 months later. I sat on a park bench and watched as Melody demonstrated to Gerald how to use the tablet she had received for her birthday. Barbara sat close by and listened as Melody described a game she liked to play, which Peter and Jessica's sons played on the swings and often called for Melody to join them. The family therapy sessions had been challenging but essential. At first, Gerald and Barbara had been defensive, but the therapist expertly led us through discussions about respecting boundaries and the trauma Michael's death had caused us all. The grandparenting classes had an even greater impact, as Barbara revealed in our most recent therapy session that they had been raising Melody in the same manner. Her words, "The world is different now, children are different, and we need to be different too," were obviously difficult for her. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. There were still tense moments where old patterns threatened. Their sons in the 1980s were perhaps too eager for independence and placed more emphasis on toughness than emotional support. To emerge, that there was real, significant progress that helped Melody most of all. Janet texted me, "How's it going?" And I smiled. Better than expected. They're actually listening to her. Janet had joined the vast support system I had established around Melody, and I had learned my lesson about depending too much on any one source of help. As I watched my daughter laugh at something Gerald said, I experienced a complex range of emotions, not the vindictive satisfaction I might have once imagined, but something more valuable, the peace of knowing I had Janet, Peter, Jessica, my friend Elaine, and several other trusted adults in her life in addition to Gerald and Barbara. Melody safeguarded my daughter while still maintaining her relationship with her. This was the true father's family. Victory appeared to be about avoiding destruction, relationships, but turning them into something more healthful for everybody. Participant